once again, it's Tanya Global, and we're here at another Youthful Solutions Conversations. And this conversation series is called Bridging the Gen Gap. And so we have today with us a friend, a colleague who is involved in business strategy, and things like that. And he is going to give us his take on his young life and what his experiences were like, because we want to bridge the gap. We want young people to understand that adults and elders were also young, and some of the challenges that are faced now are not unique. They're not different. It's just different trends, but it's the same science. And so I want to welcome today Craig from Rofaki Incorporated. Welcome, Craig. Thank you for joining us. And so I'm just going to ask a series of questions, and I'm going to just ask you to share your story. So my first question is, what was it like when you were a young man, a teen? What was it like for you growing up as a young man in Jamaica?
All right. First of all, thanks for having me. Right. It's always a pleasure talking to you. Let me make this disclaimer first. Right. My upbringing, I wouldn't consider it to be typical. Right. So that being said, I will share my experiences. Right. As a young man, in Jamaica, you know, growing up with a single mom. Right. Had a lot of exposure to the inner city life and also the rural life, right? So I got some balance between the two, right? So even though I watched TV, I didn't watch a lot of TV growing up, right? It was more outdoor kind of activities, right? Playing football, stuff like that, playing games with boys and girls, and at a younger age. So I did a lot of outdoor activities, right? So it was pleasurable, a lot of enjoyment, youthful enjoyment and stuff, and in the younger years. And also, growing up, getting old, I get to see the differences between the whole, the inner city and the rural life. So I would say that it's not typical because I got a good blend of both.
Okay, good. So you got a good blend of both urban life, rural life, and that helped to balance the experiences with a single mother household. That's good because that's something that a lot of young men struggle with. Growing up in a female-headed household and not having the balance of other male role models and male caregivers in the home. So tell me, as a young man in that time, what were some of the major things happening with young people in Jamaica at the time when you were young? What was the culture, the music? You said you had fun. What were these avenues for fun that you got to partake in?
All right. It's interesting because as going into the teenage years,
Yes.
right? We move from the just the playing and stuff now, so we get exposure to I would say music played a big part, right? Dancehall music played a big part in my socialization, and with that dancehall music, you had exposure to what the culture was at the time, what the message was at the time. It shaped a lot of how we were thinking as youngsters, right? So I grew up on I grew up on like dancehall, a lot of inner city music, music sound systems and stuff like that. In the days of the cassette, right? And then we had sound clashes. We're too young to go to some of them, but we had the recordings that we would listen to by, and that played a lot in terms of how we view the society, right, as young people, and wanted to be like those entertainers, right? And then you had I would say now from that it spin off into the whole thing of the cable television, right? And the different series and shows that became a way of escaping, or a kind of, not really escaping, but a kind of pastime, right? And that also influenced us as young people growing up, right? Getting exposed to new ideas. Some of them were positive, some were not positive. And I think that, outside of that, the dancehall music, which was, as I said, a big part of it, and the cable, there was, I would say, a lot of sports, football, played a big part in that as well. going to different matches and stuff. I would say that, those were the major markers for us growing up in that
Okay.
time.
Okay, so we say that music, and young people now would think that, yeah, music was for a lot of us, it was our world. It shaped our ideas, and just like it does now, a lot of people, as Craig said, wanted to emulate the dancehall artists and the musicians at the time. Sporting events was a big thing for you. Still, Jamaica very big on sports, but recreation overall very important markers for young people to engage, have positive interactions. And as I said, some of the messages good, some are bad. Cable television came in as a major instrument of socialization, and I think for a lot of us as well, it was a tool to kind of see the rest of the world. We used to see the rest of the world through books. With the introduction of cable television, we got to see how other people were living in different countries, England, America, Canada. We saw those TV shows, and it gave us a little glimpse. Like the young people now, they're watching African series, and it gives them a glimpse of what's happening. So cable television came in and introduced us to the world. Now young people have more of it, streaming, live streaming, YouTube, different avenues for this exposure. All right, so we see the similarities, because the point of bridging the gen gap is to say, hey, we went through the same thing. We had to get accustomed to new emerging trends like cable and different things. But what were some of the challenges that young people in your time were facing? What were the main issues? We hear about teen pregnancy, gang violence. Now we see a lot of drug addiction, gang violence, mass shootings in the United States, gang violence in Jamaica. But what were some of the main issues that young people in your time had to contend with?
Okay. Again, from my perspective, right? I would say that, young people faced one challenges was of in terms of career economics, right? In terms of going to school, going to tertiary education, the cost of going there, right? That was one. Um, in addition to that, it was more or less, I would say that the mindset behind majority of young people coming from, in terms of, I would say there was a shift in the culture, right? And there was a shift in the culture with all of this exposure to, globalization, to the whole thing of the cable TV, because it yes, it expanded our thinking, right? As it relates to exposing us to new ideas, new worlds. But in addition to that, we as a society, I don't think, was really prepared for that, right? So now youngsters now became aware of certain things, and their parents were not really in that position to kind of guide along some of those areas. So now the kids became the pioneers, right? Pioneering in places where they really don't know,
Give us an
right?
example, man. Give us
So,
to make it
all
real
right,
for us. You use the context of gangs, because I
all
remember
right.
before we
All right.
started
Let's
recording,
let's
you
put it let's put it as simple as this, right? We get exposed to fashion, right? And in being exposed to fashion, there was a desire for fashion that we couldn't afford. You had some children who had the benefit of having parents overseas. So they would send. That's where the Higla industry became so popular and
who
prevalent.
who were Higlas? What was the Higla
Higlas were
industry for?
were,
Our
were
global
considered okay.
family.
Higlas are really what we consider to be informal exporters, importers, right, of clothing and stuff like that, right? So that's just one example of how the fashion trend, being exposed to the different artists globally and stuff like that, and the movies and stuff, you start to see certain kind of fashion that we can't afford. So what happened is you have a lot of youths started to do like sewing, right? You have the tailors. Yes, you had the old tailors from back in the day, but then you have the young guys now start to bridge that gap between wanting those kind of fashion, can't afford it, so have to start to make it,
Okay,
right?
I like that.
Yeah.
That's a very important point you're sharing. So you're saying to me, with this emergence of this new culture now, so you want to dress like how you see this fashion being portrayed on cable television, notably BET, no doubt, and stuff. And the young men started to bridge the gap and branch off into industries which weren't typically youth or even male specific industries like tailoring, designing to make those fashions. Now that's good. And I would say that's the industrious nature of Jamaica that I grew up in, where we take our hand and let's say you turn it and you make fashion, you make do with what you have and create something from that. And so that's beautiful. I like that.
So I remember like even we used to have some brands, I don't know, Paco or something like that, and the guys would make them, I think, even better than how the original was, right? And and it was guys, and you had girls who were making some of those kind of dresses, outfit for the parties and stuff like that that they couldn't afford, and you couldn't tell, because I think that at that time I'm probably bridging the gap here, the free zone, right? There were persons who work at the free zone, but at the same time, I don't know if their exposure to those things also influenced that. But out of the young people at my time, there was a lot of fashion consciousness that came out of it, and I found that to be very, very tough. For myself, I couldn't sew, but all of my jeans, all of those things were custom made.
Right.
You know,
And we see that still to this day where young people are pioneering fashion. Now they're taking old things and restructuring them for new clothing. They have different types of approaches. So I like how you put that positive spin on it. But what were some of the negative challenges facing young people at the time as well? Because we're
Mhm.
trying to connect with the generations and say, hey, we went through some of this.
Right.
Because I have another interview with somebody who talked about civil rights and segregation. That's when she was young, and that was rough. So what were some of the rough times for youth in your generation?
You see again, all right. I'll give a context of my background already. So one of the challenges that for what I saw for young men, fatherless men, right? Um, that was an issue, right? And what the issue was, the cause of the issue was fatherlessness, right? Growing up with single mothers, stuff like that. And the issue became that lack of role model for a lot of young men, right? Um, and I think out of that, there was, in my mind, right, a rise in terms of gangs, crews coming together, following what those father figures that were not from the home, but in the community and different areas, right? And I think that that is kind of the root of the whole gang violence kind of thing, right? I think that at my time growing up, it wasn't seen as a criminal thing, right? Because it was natural for us to, like, for example, where I grew up, Sunday mornings, there was not my immediate area, but there's a borderline area, and all the guys Sunday morning play football, congregate there, right? And it's that male bonding of some of the older guys. They were pretty much the father figures. We never see it as a father figure, but that's pretty much what it was. Now, you ask the negative. Not all of those role models were quote unquote. Some of them people would consider to be criminals, right? But we as youngsters didn't see them as criminals. We saw them as role models, right? And so you can see why I'm hesitant in terms of what the negative is or the positive, because at that time, and even to some extent, even still looking at now, um, they were still role models, and they were still positive role models, even though there were those negative connotation that we couldn't identify at the time. So
Okay. So we saw that. So out of that negative again, a positive thing emerged, but also that negative role model, which I'm sure mushroomed in a lot of the gang violence that we now see evolving among the young people. That it's started at a certain point, and kind of grew. So I know that you have young children. I know you live in a multi-generational household. Um, how do you bridge the gap between yourself and your millennial aged children and grandchildren? How do you bridge the gap? Because a lot of people out there watching and they're looking for ideas. How do you bridge the gap, this generational gap?
well, some people say that I'm rigid, right? For me, that some things are pretty much simple, right? Um, one come before two, and two come before three. So the different generations are already aligned. So everybody have to know to fall in line, right? I grew up like that, right? So for me, it's really natural. Now, so in terms of the order of seniority, that comes with you didn't choose that, so it's automatic. So that's not a complication as far as I'm concerned, right? So I have my granddaughter, I have my daughter, right? I have nephews, whatever. The seniority in terms of age, line that takes care of that, right? Where I think the more complex thing comes in is that I have shifted away from my generation growing up. Is that we start to acknowledge personal responsibility, right? And when I was growing up, it was more or less dictatorial, right? They dictate. You do that, you don't do that, you go there, you don't go there, and action and consequences, right? Um, that worked to a certain extent. And for me, it worked to a certain extent, right? But there was a part in it as a young man where, in terms of the lack of engagement, the lack of positive engagement, in terms of questions that I have to ask, um, that guidance in terms of the way you're thinking, not just what you're thinking, but how you're thinking, that was lacking for me. And it was lacking for a lot of young men and women, right? So for me, that allowed me now to engage my children, not just based on what they are, as in young children, but in terms of who they are, right? And give them that environment with respect, right? For them to explore and discover who they are, and to see me as what I am, their father, grandfather, whatever, but I'm also a person. So who I am. And I think that dynamic has helped me to, bridge that gap and ensure that the respect is there, but also that line of seniority and generational gap is bridged but not removed. Right? So that's what I think.
That's a powerful concept, the what and the who. And I think you way you explain it really helps to preserve culture because they get to build a relationship with you while respecting that role, and you do the same with them. And it's good to see that despite going through certain deficiencies, you choose to start acknowledge and say, okay, this is what I didn't have, and so I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but now I'm going to try to bridge that gap by engaging. I didn't get that engagement, so I am going to engage my children. And I think that's what a lot of millennials appreciate in this time, being engaged, because there's so many other stimuli around, so many other influences. For you, it was cable and the music. It's still cable now, but it's multi-streaming and social media. Until there's so much more stimulation, it's good to hear that concept, the what and the who, and being able to differentiate them while we respect the process of growing together and parenting millennials. So I'm thankful for that tip in terms of bridging the gen gap. What would you say in closing to parents who are ripping out their hair out of their head? They just can't manage. They are not connecting with their millennial age children, and they are at their wits end. What would you say to them? What are you using? Because as you said, you have small, young ones, and what are you using? How could you give them a tip as to what else can they do to be able to connect with their millennials?
All right. Um, First and foremost, I'm careful when we talk about when we classify things, because words are very powerful, and our interpretation of these words, like millennials, it mean a lot of different things to different people.
It
Right?
does, it does, because based on my knowledge of your age
Yeah.
and mine,
Yeah.
we are actually millennials because
Yeah.
we were born at the introduction to technology. So we're actually the oldest millennials that they actually call Generation X. But nobody remembers Generation X now because you have. And I was interviewing an elder in her 70s who considered herself a millennial because when she was going to college, she was exposed to technology.
Okay.
And she's in her 70s.
Right.
So you are very right when we're defining these concepts. But for the purpose of youthful solutions, it's really a generation. And each generation is shaped. Like I said, that shaping with the music, that shaping. And then that music was shaped by something else. usually the social and the political and the economic situation that that society or group is going through at the time. So it's really those things that are shaping this generation, and then this generation now has a shared set of features and characteristics that they can be known by. Our post-war, our baby boomers, our generation X, and now the other millennials, which is the Ys and the Zs and the alphas, right? And how they're being shaped. And my purpose here is to bring youth development principles, which is a science. It really never changes. It's just the trends around it that change. And so we want to be able to put that in the frame. So
Okay, so that being said, right, millennials, as you know, are associated with technology age, right, age of technology, and this information age, and this, you know, where we're at. So I'm gonna say, you know, dealing with millennials, we have to understand what we're dealing with, right? Now I'm gonna step back a little to speak on technology to set a frame. Now we ourselves, as parents and as you know, the older set of people, have been misguided by technology, right? Because technology, in its basic form, is how you do something. That's technology. A spoon is a technology to eat,
that's right.
right? A knife is a technology to cut. So technology exists to do something. So we get advanced technology, advanced way of doing something. So now we have created this environment, right, where technology has been redefined in our minds. So technology becomes something, right? And now because technology becomes something, technology now is the thing, right? So we get lost in this process of following technology. Started out as doing something, then it becomes the thing to do, then it becomes the thing that we follow. So I think that millennials fall in the category of coming at a time where they are following technology, right? And they become very good at following technology, and they are very good at that. The issue is that technology exists to do something. What is that thing that we're doing? We as a culture are following technology. Millennials come into that culture, and because they are good at that, following that thing, the gap exists now where we are trying to now relate to them about the thing that should be done, right? But we don't recognize that really and truly there's a big gap, not just with millennials, with even us, with society, whereby where technology is leading all of us, right? We're gone to the technology age, we're gone beyond that. Technology now is leading us. Nobody's really asking, where are we going? You know, where's it? And I think that millennials coming into that, some of them are going to be asking certain questions, where we're going or why. And the elders can't even answer those questions. So now we start having with this, it's really a confusing time, right? And it's a very powerful question that you're asking, right? And I think that for me, how do I deal with millennials? I go back to the basics. I go back to the basics as relationship. I leave technology out of it. What do you want? You know, who are you? You know, where you're going? You know, how you plan to do it? Basics, right? Because I can't really teach millennials about technology. They're born into it, right? But what I do know is that what matters is where you're going. How is the technology helping you? You know, where do you want to go? And I think that's what children born at any time have those same needs. It's just that it's difficult to identify those needs for the millennials because they're born at a time where, you know, the confusion exists before them, right? And that's the best way I can put it.
Thank you so much. That's food for thought. That's food for thought. That's a lot of food for thought. And I want to thank you. I know that you are writing a book about for men, and it's I just want you to give us a quick, just a minute. Tell us the title of the book. What's the inspiration for the book, and when can we expect? Because in youth development across the globe, we we need books like that. So just quickly in closing.
All right. As I said, my background is a bit of one from a single family home, right? And there are things that I have not, deep things that I have not, shared with anybody really. And you know, these things are really about a fatherless journey to manhood, right? That's really what this book is about, right? And it's for fatherless young males. I'm a black man. It's really focused on my journey and helping other black males, into that journey to manhood. Doesn't mean that it only happens with a black man. It happens all around. But because of my experience, and because of the challenge that I see with young black males, not understanding this journey and not, becoming a statistic of the system and of their whole internal, lack of development. So that's really what I'm trying to put forward in this book, to see if it can help, other young men and older men too, to correct course and to find their way on their masculine journey.
Thank you so much. So that's Craig Gentles from Rofaki Incorporated. We want to thank you again, sir, for just dropping in to have that conversation. We look forward to the fatherless journey to manhood. We look forward to the release and we wish you all the success. And we want to thank you for being on Youthful Solutions Conversation with Tanya Global. It was a pleasure having you here, and it's a lot of food for thought. And I hope that you, the viewers, will enjoy the conversation. Please don't forget to click subscribe, like the video, and share as we continue these conversations. And if you know somebody, we'd love to have a lot of elders who want to be a part of our conversations to share your journey as an adult when you were young, so that other generations of young people can see that there's a lot more for us to relate to. As Craig said, keep it simple, ask the simple questions. Where are we going? Who am I? And that's the science of youth development. So again, it's Tanya Global, and you are listening to Youthful Solutions Conversations. Thank you.